I want to welcome you this evening to what promises to be an engaging and informative conversation on the very important theme of what it means to be human. My name is John Franklin, and I'll be your MC for the evening. And by way of introduction, let me say that the focus of my work is with artists. I oversee an organization called IMAGO, Image, as in Imago Dei, Image of God, which seeks to advocate for artists, particularly artists of faith, in all of the arts. And there are, of course, some hints in the room this evening that art will be an element in our conversation tonight. Psychologists often speak of an identity crisis, where we're not quite sure who we are. One could say that currently in our Western culture, we're experiencing an identity crisis. I'm thinking particularly of our efforts to sort out what it means to be human. Are we simply machines? Is a brain just some kind of sophisticated computer? Are we merely animals and nothing more? Or we might ask, what does it mean to be a person? How are we to understand human consciousness? These questions swirl around us and can leave us perplexed and uncertain about our identity as human beings. And this uncertainty leads to more concerns about the very meaning of human existence. Now, these are big questions, and we're not going to try and find final answers to them tonight, so be reassured. We're going to explore, though. We want to take some time to explore. And we explore in the hope that we might better understand what it means to be human. In a culture in which we seem to be obsessed with being entertained, and I recall the title of a book from some years ago by Neil Postman, Amusing Ourselves to Death, it still seems to ring true. In such a culture, we need to take time to reflect on who we are and what, if any significance our lives may have. That's what we want to reflect on tonight. Are we trapped in a wasteland of meaninglessness, or are we participants in a rich and meaningful environment in which we may discover deep significance for life? Well, so much for the topic before us. Here's how the evening is going to unfold. We're going to begin with a talk of about 20 minutes from our special guest, Sam Allberry. That will be followed by a couple of minutes for reflection during a musical interlude. We'll then have an interview with two visual artists, Maria Gabankova and Josh Tiessen. And we'll explore a little bit their take on what it means to be human. Then you in the audience will gather into small groups to discuss some questions on our theme. And after that, we'll conclude with a panel where we'll further explore what it means to be human through conversation and engagement, ultimately with questions from you, the audience. So we want you to participate a little later in the program. So let's get started. Sam Allberry, we're pleased to have you here, Sam. He's an itinerant speaker with Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. He's based in Maidenhead in England. You know where that is? Somewhere between London and Oxford, a little closer to London. Anyway, Maidenhead, England. Sam is a graduate of the University of Oxford, and his perspective on things is deeply influenced by the biblical narrative. He's the author of numerous books on the Christian faith, including, and this is a question I expect some in this room have asked, why bother with the church? In his spare time, Sam enjoys hiking, American history, and apparently slowly perfecting a recipe for Thai green curry. That'll warm the hearts of some here. Sam, we're very pleased to have you, and we invite you to come now and talk to us about what it means to be human. Please welcome Sam. You could stand here.
Well, thank you for that welcome. It's my pleasure to be here, and I need to begin just by, I've had a chance to meet a couple of the artists, but just to say how in awe I am of these amazing works of art around us. As someone who only got as far as drawing caricatures of teachers at high school, seriously, I am really in awe of the talent that we are able to enjoy. So thank you to the artists. We're looking forward to hearing from you as well. And it reminds us that this question of what does it mean to be human is not just a philosophical question. Actually, it's an aesthetic one. And it's one we are so grateful to the arts for help in helping us to engage with. I want to pick up where John left off and to say that there are no shortage of voices that will try to help us answer that question of what does it mean to be human. There are some, as John has intimated, who would say that we're fundamentally minds. Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am." When you strip everything back, when you boil everything down, what you finally, ultimately end up with is you and your mind. That is the bottom line of your humanity. That is the foundation of what makes you a human being. And that's an attractive perspective, I think, for many of us today. It feels compelling. Many of us instinctively sense that we are different to other creatures on this planet. This way of thinking about what it means to be human seems to account for that. We do stroke our chins and reflect on our own reasoning in a way we don't sense other creatures do. To say we're fundamentally minds also appeals to us if we're naturally kind of thinky types anyway. It's kind of flattering. It means actually we're probably doing a pretty good job of being people just by being those who naturally like thinking. But if we are fundamentally minds, if that is what is ultimately what makes us human, what does that say about people with less capacity to reason? Are they less human? Are they less valuable? If someone is less intelligent, does that give them less worth as a fellow human being? And in any case, is our own reasoning that reliable that we would actually stake the essence of our humanity upon it? So some would say we're fundamentally minds. Others would say we're fundamentally animals, and this is increasingly common. We are just fellow creatures with everything else living on this planet. One species among many. We're not special. And again, that does make some sense to us. We share over 95% of our DNA with chimpanzees. So biologically, we are very, very alike. We share similar, very basic instincts with much of the animal world. We have these same impulses to eat, to protect, to mate, to propagate. Let's not get overly fussy about what we are. We're just fellow animals. One thinker has even said that we need to stop with the speciesism. We are no more valuable a species than any other. And so we shouldn't privilege humanity in any way at all. But again, yes, we are fellow creatures, but is that all we are? Are we just animals? Because if you look around at nature, it's pretty ruthless. Do we really want to say it's okay to treat one another and to behave as we see animals doing? Our whole sense of human justice, whether we're talking about legal justice system or our own sense of social justice, is based on the assumption that we're not just animals. And it's hard to account for that if that is all we are. We sense that we have a greater degree of agency, a greater sense of responsibility. We're more capable, more is expected of us, and we are therefore more accountable for how we behave because we're animals, but we're not just animals. Well, again, others would say we're fundamentally economic resources. That is how you measure someone's humanity. We don't often say this, but we often act as though this is the case. We are, as humans, what we can accomplish and contribute. And so we base our human identity on our economic value. And so we instinctively ask one another, what do you do? Or if you're students, you'll instinctively ask each other, what do you hope to do? And that can easily become the basis on which we evaluate how much someone matters. And so instinctively, for many people today, if you meet someone who is unskilled, it's very easy to think, well, that person is worth less to society than someone who's professional. They matter just a bit less. Someone who is a professional, someone who's specialized, we sense they're worth a bit more to society. They matter a bit more. But again, in our better moments, we sense that it's kind of a shallow way of thinking about other people. We sense that our worth and dignity isn't just based on what we can contribute. So I want to suggest a different perspective to you this evening. And I want to kind of base that on two things I suspect all of us sense about ourselves. Two things we sense. The first is, I think we sense our smallness. This often hits us, doesn't it, when we're actually thinking about nature. A friend of mine said a while ago, it really kind of struck me. She said, no one ever stands at the edge of the Grand Canyon and says, I am awesome. You stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon and you think, that is awesome, and I am very small. Neil Armstrong was reflecting once on what it was like to look at the Earth from space. What it was like to look at the Earth even from the moon. He said, it suddenly struck me that tiny pea, pretty and blue, was Earth. He said, I put up my thumb and shut one eye, and I blotted out planet Earth. He said, doing that didn't make me feel like a giant. It made me feel very, very small. You know, if this planet ceased to exist, it's not as if the rest of the universe would notice. We sense our smallness, and we sense there's something healthy about coming to terms with that. If someone thinks they are the center of the universe, we don't think that's a healthy way to live or a healthy way to think. And so seeing the scale and beauty of the natural world around us does reorder the way we think about ourselves. So we sense our smallness. But the second thing we sense is that we matter. Around this room this evening, I'm sure we will have a variety of views of where we think we've come from. Some of us will have some kind of religious framework where we will believe that we've been created by a God or some other means. Some of us might be atheists and think, no, we've just come about simply through evolution and there's no other narrative to put over on top of that. Others of us might not quite be sure one way or the other. But I want to suggest that however we think we got here, all of us sense that we matter. We sense that life should have meaning. Even if we're not sure what the meaning is, we sense there ought to be meaning. That despite our smallness, we sense something unique and profound happens every time a human being is born. And that sense that we matter is actually the basis of our thinking about one another. On the 10th of December in 1948, something quite historically unprecedented happened. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was proclaimed in Paris. And the very first of those rights enumerated said, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. We sense that there is something innately valuable about every person we will ever meet. And my question is, how do we account for that sense? I mentioned that Declaration of Universal Human Rights was historically unusual because if you take the long view of history, it is not common for people to assume that all people have innate worth and equal rights. If we are so small, why do we matter? And if we do matter, how do we reconcile that to the fact that we are so small in this universe? Those of us who might describe ourselves as secular humanists, if we are truly secular, on what basis are we humanists? From where do we get the notion that humanity matters? Well, I want to share with you some ancient words from the Hebrew Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament. These are words attributed to King David of Israel. They're from one of his Psalms. And they are words from a prayer to God. And in the course of this prayer, David is contemplating the night sky. He says, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place." And we need to remember that David didn't live in Toronto. When David looked up at the night sky, he could count more than 4 stars. I live just outside London. I'm lucky if I can count to 2 stars. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of being somewhere far, far away from towns and cities and light pollutions, and you've had a chance to look up at the night sky and realized it is covered in stars. It's quite breathtaking. Well, as David thinks about the starry night, it prompts a question. He says, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you've set in place, what is man that you're mindful of him, the Son of Man that you care for him?" David is saying, listen, when I see the scale of the universe, it makes me think, as he's talking to God, he says, why do you care so much about people? David doesn't wonder if we matter to God. David wonders why we matter to God. He just knows that we do. He doesn't doubt God's love. He marvels at it. Why does God love us? Well, the biblical account of the answer to that question is that we have been created by a God who is much, much bigger than us. And the scale of this universe, the scale and beauty of this world is just one reflection of the scale and beauty of the God who made us. That's why we feel small. That's why we're right to feel small. And yet the Bible also shows us that the God who made us cares for each one of us. It speaks to us of the intrinsic worth of every human. And again, I want to suggest it's hard to account for the worth of every human life unless that worth comes from outside humanity. And the claim of Christian scriptures is that we have worth because God has made us. We're precious to him. Even compared to everything else he's made, he thinks of us in a way that is special and unique. David goes on to say in that psalm that we've been crowned with glory and honor. There is something glorious about another human being. There is something to be honored about another human being. You will not meet someone who isn't amazing. You will not meet someone who's not worthy of your care, worthy of your attention, worthy of your service. And yet, you're also not going to meet someone who isn't a little bit irritating. Because the fact is, we're not very good at being people. And I think we sense that too, don't we? And because we matter, that matters as well. We matter enough for God to care about how we live. We matter enough for God to care about how we treat one another. We matter enough for God to care about how we mistreat one another. And yet we also matter enough that God doesn't just leave us in that situation. Doesn't just leave us feeling that gap between what we sense we should be and yet what we actually are. The story of Scripture goes on to show us that the God who created the stars one day was born under a star. That the Creator stepped into his creation. That the one who made humanity became human. To restore us to our Creator, but also to restore us to our humanity. And because of that, we don't just have to look at the stars to see the wonder of God's love. We can also look at a wooden cross in Jerusalem and again say to God, what is man that you are mindful of him? The Son of Man that you care for him. What does it mean to be human? I think the biblical account is that actually it means to be made and known by a God who loves you that much. Thank you for listening. I'm going to hand over to John.
Well, thank you for that, Sam. You've given us much to reflect on. And I'd like us just to take a couple of minutes now to do just that. Maybe ask yourself the question, what do I think about what it means to be human? And what threads do you draw from what Sam has just said? Now, while David plays, quietly, we'll just take a couple of minutes to reflect, and then we'll move to the interview with the artists. Thank you, David. Maria, Josh? Come on up. Well, very briefly, by way of introduction, I've known Maria for a number of years now, and have great admiration for her work, 2 examples of which you see here, and I think there may eventually be another one up on the screen in a moment, or on the wall. Maria taught for many years at OCAD. She was an instructor in figure drawing. And she is a person who thinks deeply about what it means to be human. So Maria, I'm pleased to have you as part of this discussion. And Josh, I have not known you a long time, but we've had a few very good conversations. Josh has been painting since he was very young. And he continues in a prolific way to do paintings like the 2 you see over there. And his paintings are probing questions about the human condition. So it's great to have you here as well, Josh. So the questions. We're going to have a conversation and invite you to listen in. That's the questions for the group. I need the questions for you. Yeah, I probably did. That's it. Okay. There we are. So Maria, I'm going to begin with you. As an artist, you've had a long-standing interest in the human figure. And your art seeks to capture not only the physical body, but something of what's going on inside the person. The spirit, if you like. You want to provide a glimpse into the inner life. Do we need to be further apart? Into the inner life of the person. Can you tell us about your fascination with the human and what it is you try to do in your art?
If I can start just with a short paragraph.
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
So this is from one of my many artist statements that I always struggle over with, to express in words something that I'm expressing without words, which is something that's very interesting for me. And in my drawing and painting or sculpting, I strive to express that which is invisible, like music, through the means of the visible. I love to search for the hidden, the mystery, and poetry. Over the years, there's been a continuous development in my art in the way I use human figure as a primary focus. I'm also interested in exploring subtle symbolism of objects, architectural and natural elements in their relationship to the human figure. I have used the human figure in a number of compositions where I explore the meaning of spiritual reality of modern existence in relation to the radical message of the Christian faith. And here I have a quote which I really like, and that's from a book of Pascal Quignard, that's on the artist Georges de la Tour. And it says, "I am interested in how the divine mystery can be plunged into the most ordinary day-to-day appearance." So that's just a few words to say what I try to do in my work. And here are the 2 pieces that represent a certain series where I used mannequins as a metaphor for human figure.
Mannequins are not human, but they look like it in the shop windows. So is there something going on there that you said it was used as a metaphor?
Yes, and it is especially in view of what is happening with technology today, and where the robots are getting closer and closer and starting to move in with us. So that definitely, how this series actually started was that I found a huge garbage container filled with mannequins that were being thrown out by a film company near my studio on DuPont and Lansdowne, and I couldn't believe it, so I just parked and I dove into the container.
See what artists do in order to do their art?
And then I stuffed them in my car, so then I almost, my girlfriend was then driving towards me from the street, and we almost collided because she saw the legs sticking out and so on. So anyway, that was the start of, and the strange thing was that the parts did not fit. So it just started this whole amazing thinking, and it was a great inspiration that lasted for a long time, and it still continues because it's very powerful, since it is something they are actually life-size, you know, like the ones for clothes and so on.
Yeah. Another one of your paintings is showing up behind us, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Let me ask Josh a question. Josh, you've observed that art communicates our deepest longings and that art expresses our humanity. Can you comment on these observations and tell us a little bit about why you would make these claims?
Yeah, so, you know, as we know, everyone has a worldview that consists of our beliefs, our perceptual frameworks on reality. But also part of a worldview is our cultural practices, artistic practices, and they really reflect the deepest values that we hold. Because as humans, we're storied creatures. We have loves, we have desires, and really that's where the arts come in. And, you know, one of my favorite writers, Erwin McManus, and several others have noted that while animals build, humans create. And there's something unique there, that creativity, something that we all possess in varying amounts, reflects the uniqueness of humankind. And, you know, I believe that's the image of God. And so we gravitate to art because it's able to express what simply words cannot, and that's really how we respond to the human condition.
Good. I think what you may have been alluding to there, and it is imagination, and I want to ask this question to both of you. To make art requires, it seems to me, that we engage the imagination. And I want each of you to say just a little bit about how the imagination is important for you, both as an artist, and here's the challenge, and as a person of faith. How is the imagination important to you? My sense is that the imagination has got a kind of short shrift in our culture. It's changing now. There's more interest in the imagination. The religious community, the Christian community, doesn't speak much about imagination. And yet it would seem that that too is a God-given gift. And what happens, unfortunately, is our imaginations get shriveled. And it's folks like this, and like David and others, who help us to expand our imagination. So, who wants to go first on imagination? Where you go, Maria.
Go, Maria.
Yeah, I just have a couple of notes here that I was meditating on the imagination. That it is, as you mentioned now, John, is part, as I believe, is part of God's creation and his ongoing creativity, or being in a creative process along with inspiration. And this is what I like, that combination, because I often, part of the creative process, from just my experience and other artists that I've met and art students or other creative people, that everyone's creative, is that what is imagination actually, and what, apart from being aware that it is God's gift, and what is inspiration? Where does it come from? How come that we sometimes may wake up in the morning and suddenly I think that I'm going to get into this, and you know, it can be visual, or it's something that we see someone says. It can be someone's position or a look, you know, talking about human figure as an amazing, and that's why for so many centuries, and it does not end, has been such a most fascinating subject matter for artists and an inspiration in itself. So I just, continued with this, that it is a gift, a creative gift, and art transforms imagination into a work of art through which artist hopes to communicate to others or with others. As a person of faith, I recognize and experience that I want to give myself to the giver of imagination and inspiration. The creative process can then become an amazing collaboration with this amazing giver. and it cannot be taken for granted.
Josh, what are you thinking about imagination? Thank you, Maria.
Yeah. You know, for each of my paintings, I actually start from pure imagination, and I have a sketchbook on my nightside table that when I come up with an idea, like you're kind of talking about, that inspiration, that spark, I sketch it out, and it's only months or years later that I actually source photo references that I take to kind of supplement my vision. And also conceptually in my work, my latest series called Streams in the Wasteland takes its influence from the prophetic books of the Old Testament, or you know, the Hebrew Bible for Jewish people. And in the prophetic literature, why I'm so drawn to it is that these prophets, through metaphor and symbolism, really project alternate realities. And for instance, in Isaiah, there's these visual motifs of wild animals taking over inhabited cities, and so that's been an inspiration to me. So, you know, that's very, very different than maybe the Puritans who said the imagination was the devil's playground, you know, something very dark and evil to be avoided. And even in you're saying, like, as a person of faith, how imagination comes into play. One of the things that I've tried to incorporate into my morning devotional practice is something called Visio Divina, and it's this practice where I select, you know, a spiritually overt painting or biblical work of art, and then along with scripture, I really ask the Holy Spirit to inspire my imagination to dwell on these truths and really transform my imagination, as you know, it talks about in Romans 12 about the renewing of our minds. And so ultimately, when we meditate on art, when we create art, it allows us to draw closer to God. And also for me, it enables me to see the world through the lens, hopefully, of the Creator, seeing the fallenness and brokenness, but also the need and hope of redemption of our world.
That's very good. Thank you both. Yeah, imagination takes us beyond what the eye can see and allows us to see possibilities that we might not otherwise have seen. Often we get locked into the visual, the perceptions that we see or what's around us. But imagination lets us see what could be,
Beyond, yeah.
which indeed is what the biblical narrative encourages as well. Maria, your painting Freedom Bound is delightfully ambiguous in its title. You seem to be expressing something of our modern uncertainty about what it means to be human. So what inspired this work? And I'm talking about this one just here to my right. Can you just say a little bit about Freedom Bound?
Yes, this was one of the first few in that series, and I actually had an installation like that in my studio, a borrowed box and this mannequin, which I actually struggled with literally because they are quite heavy, and it took me a while, and I took a whole series of photographs of all kinds of positions when it just fell down or suddenly ended up in a very interesting pose. So it's suspended. So it was a process that was very exciting and quite unknown to me. I haven't worked that way before, and so then I ended up with this decision to paint that image. A human or a mannequin running in a box, trying to get out. It's suspended by ropes that are actually helping it to be upright, but it's also binding it. The figure cannot go anywhere. So I think that I was aware of expressing some of many frustrations that we people in our contemporary world experience, just being stuck, let's say, on 401 or anywhere, you know, and with all other frustrations there is no shortage of. So I have there in that painting, there are two limitations: the box and the ropes. The figure struggles within the confinement of the box, where the seeming limitation of the ropes in fact supports the figure and facilitates the striving to be free. Without the ropes, the figure would collapse and die in the box that will become a coffin. So, yeah, I think that's,
Okay, all right.
that's enough for that.
Remembering that artists, the reason they paint in this way is so they don't have to explain everything. But anyway, thank you very much, very helpful. And what about, Josh, your Dark Night of the Soul? It depicts a wanderer adrift in life and ultimately speaks to an emptying process, an unburdening of the soul. Do you see this gesture as a humanizing process? The painting's over there.
Yeah, so in this painting, you'll notice there's this figure on the boat, and he's kind of lost his way as there's this shipwreck. And at that time, I was taking a philosophy class, and I came across a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche, who said, when we're philosophizing, we often find that we've cut our moorings, and we're just floating out in the abyss. And this painting, though, I wanted to really show the experience, the process of the dark night of the soul, which is, in this case, there's this archetypal figure who's experiencing an emptiness, and I hope that through that process that God can use it as a transformational time in a person's life, moving someone away from the darkness of self-introspection and moving them to the light. And you know, one of the things that postmodernism has really left us with as a legacy for artists is that it's almost like a virtue to be in confusion or reject or doubt all belief systems, and to be constantly deconstructing. And there's some good things about, you know, deconstructing, and I've personally had times of doubt in my life. But really, those periods of doubt have actually caused me to look for better questions, and so that's you know, really important to me, and you know, drawing me closer to God through that process.
We're running out of time. Josh, very briefly on Rise Up, which is also over there. So just in a minute or so. And then
the painting Rise Up is a sequel to an earlier piece called Can These Bones Live, which is my modern interpretation of the Valley of Dry Bones, which is this vision from the book of Ezekiel. And in this painting, the dry bones are symbolic of the Jewish exile, and they're in the vision, the bones actually come together. And so in this metaphor of national resurrection, the homecoming of the Jewish people, there's also this foreshadowing in the broader context of the Bible of a resurrection, basically enabling human hearts to be able to live in a world of justice and peace, which has, you know, traditionally been called heaven. And so my painting was a musing on resurrection, how bodily death gives way to bodily life, and our souls make up of all of who we are, both our unique personality and ethnicity. And so that's what the painting was really about, transcending all that, and really a longing to a world set right.
Yes, and finally, Maria, your fascinating and very large work, we don't have it here tonight, Leaky Boat, which you did a good while ago. Can you just give us a little bit of insight as to what's going on there in Leaky Boat?
Thank you, John. And I just wanted to get back to what you were saying about that emptiness. And I had some years ago an exhibition at the Regent College in Vancouver, and that painting was several times diminishing kind of a representation of that. It was called under the title of Body of Dust. And I had a quote there by Blaise Pascal that was attributed to him that said, "There is an emptiness in human heart that only God can fill." So that was like relating to what you were saying there. And so this boat, this leaky boat was also an installation in my studio. And there are people, there's my husband Aleš, some friends, and there is my assistant, that was Mike, and a couple of friends. And then we have, as you can see, that boat has holes, and it's definitely leaking and sinking. And this is representing a journey through life. Where are we coming from? Where are we? Where are we heading? What is the direction of our life? There is, you can see on the sail, the Alpha and Omega. And there is a paper floating in the water that has the verse from Revelations, and I saw a new heaven and new earth. And there is another verse there from Leonard Cohen, everybody knows that the boat is leaking. Everybody knows that the captain lied. So there's like a number of references, and the whole painting also, in a way, alludes to Hieronymus Bosch's painting, The Ship of Fools, where the fools are the clergy. Here it's us, ordinary people, that are questioning and wondering, where are we heading? And so that's kind of basically. And also, you know, before, I have this book here where John Franklin wrote a wonderful introduction to it. It's called Body Broken, Body Redeemed, which expresses also the reality that I'm not preoccupied only with the brokenness and the dark, but also with the hope and redemption. So if you want to look at it later, we can do that.
Yeah, we should add just a brief commercial that there's that book, and you have a book at the back as well. But we need to talk about that at the moment. Time passes very quickly. Please join me in thanking Maria and Josh.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you. We cannot clap.
All right, the next phase of the evening is, and it's a bit complex here to do this, but to have you break into groups for about 15 minutes. There's a set of 6 questions. You're not expected to answer them all, but each group will have a leader. And leaders, stand up. Where are you, leaders? Okay, so choose a leader and whatever that's nearby, and then go into groups, have a conversation. And when you're done that conversation, we want you to then come back. We're going to have a panel, and we're going to have some discussion and invite you into the conversation with the panel. So now to the groups for the next 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You've met Sam, you've met Josh, and you've met Maria, and we're pleased to have also Steve. Steve, who's going to, his artwork is at the back. Goslinski, yeah, Goslinski is his last name. He's Irish. So, I want to start with Steve. Steve, you've done, I think, what you'd call a comic kind of thing, and you've got this, on one of them, you've got this individual floating down. Can you just say a little bit about what's going on there? Just so you know, we're going to have a little bit of conversation with the panel for about 7.5 minutes, and then we're going to have you guys jump in.
So the comic that he's talking about is one called Float, which is at the back there. It's a single-page comic, and the one with the spaceman is unnamed. I think it's like James 4 it's based on. But they're both sort of vaguely around a similar theme, which is something we've already talked about a little bit, sort of the sense of longing. And the idea that even in like the dark moments and even in times of fear, which the spaceman one particularly comments on, there is this sense of something pulling you outward, and the sense of that longing is not a negative thing, but is in fact indicative of something that we're missing, something that is out there that we can grasp onto.
All right, there is something very human about this business of longing. We all want to have something more, and often we don't even know what it is we long for, but it is very much a part of what it is to be human. Now, I want to just give you folks, Sam, if you want to ask Josh, or Maria a question, or Maria, if you want to ask Josh or Sam, can you guys, do you have anything you want to ask one another? Clarification, comment, whatever. Oh,
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to just comment on Sam's talk. One thing that I thought was really terrific that you addressed was when we're talking about what it means to be human, that there needs to be some kind of contrast to the animal kingdom and to the environment. And, you know, a lot of my work is about the relationship between humans and the animal world. And so I was just wondering if you think if that's an important aspect that needs to be highlighted more so, just because we see these ethical dilemmas. You remember Harambe, the gorilla, who at the Cincinnati Zoo activists, you know, claimed that it was wrong that the gorilla was shot because the 3-year-old child. We have tons of 3-year-old children all over the world, but we have only a few gorillas. So what would you say?
I'm not going to talk about that situation
Okay, yeah,
specifically, but more generally, I think one of the things I love about the biblical perspective on our humanness is that it blends both dignity with humility. So the fact that we are image bearers of God gives every single one of us dignity, and that is so foundational to the Christian view of the world that there is not a single person who does not deserve extraordinary dignity. But that doesn't or shouldn't lead to arrogance or kind of a sense of superiority and that kind of thing, because actually the very fact that we're made in the image of God means we are meant to reflect God's own care for his world to his world. So it both dignifies us and also makes it so that we're not ultimate. It humbles us too. So I think we need to hold both of those two things together. If we only think of ourselves in terms of dignity, we can become complacent, we can become arrogant about our relationship to the rest of nature and to the planet and to the environment. But we mustn't also think of ourselves as just merely creatures made by a creator. We do have unique dignity and a unique place in this world. But that place is such that we should be stewarding and caring for this world as the creator would be doing so himself.
Let me ask, I'll call it a quick question, but it isn't really, but to Sam, the effort to think of humanity strictly in scientific terms bumps into some problems relative to morality. We can account for people in biological terms or as a machine or whatever, but then we have no grounds for moral guidance. Can you just comment on that? Does that seem right to you?
I think so, yes. And, you know, we rely on our growing scientific knowledge and understanding of human beings, of human bodies, in so many ways that it's easy to forget what aspects of our humanity science can't help us with. Science can deal with the what we are. It can't really deal with the who we are. And we can think about the mechanics of the human body and various aspects of that. But we have a sense that there's not just an is to our humanity, there's an ought. That we ought to behave in a certain way. And we can't extrapolate that merely, I think, from a scientific account of a human person. I think the scientific account is vital, but it's incomplete.
Thank you, Sam. Now, I have a couple of questions here that have been texted to me. Is that that's the word, isn't it? Texted. But I'd like to have somebody, if you wish, to stand up and ask a question. And if not, we'll go to these in a moment. Anyone have a question, or are you all just shy? Did I see one back there? No, I didn't. Go ahead. Yeah, stand up. Yeah.
Thanks for your responses. In the different pieces, there was elements of speaking of liberation and freedom from certain things. So based on your understanding of what it means to be human, what does it mean to be free? And how do you express that? Is freedom just being uninhibited by external forces? Is it the freedom to act according to your nature, or is it something else?
There you are, Maria. Yeah. It relates to freedom bound over there.
Yes, That's something that I, search for all the time, trying to understand. And the big question is that really troubles me is with all the amazing discoveries that human spirit and human mind and everything that we have from God, that humans are equipped to discover and to work, and all the technology and the almost miraculous advances, as we see how fantastic they are, they're also used by the evil. And that's something that, I'm sure everybody can relate to as we are human. So how do we, and that has to do with the question of freedom, because we are free, and I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding what freedom really means. Because that doesn't, obviously many people maybe think that it means to do whatever we want and to go beyond, and always stretching ourselves and finding out something new, and just enjoy life and using, and often it is at the expense of others, often by harming others and mistreating them and so on. And so I believe that it is an interesting subject matter to explore in art also, and to search for that, because it never ends. It's like we are always, I think that's one of the biggest things as part of being human is the searching.
Yeah.
And it has to do with that longing. Yeah.
Let me just, okay, you may want to respond to this, but one of the things that's often said, and thank you for your question, is that if you're religious, if you're Christian, you got an awful lot of limitations on you. And how can one be an artist when artist presupposes freedom to do whatever you want? So can you respond a little bit to how that works in terms of freedom, limitations, faith, art?
Yeah, so I think there's a really good parallel between ethics and artistry, because there's this good analogy that Timothy Keller gave in playing the piano. So if freedom is thought with arts that you can play whatever you want on the piano, as a child you're not going to get very far, and you're not going to become like David was here this evening, just beautifully playing the keys. You have to have limitation. You have to have discipline, and that discipline of going through scales is the same with visual art as well. Is that training, that time put in, ultimately allows you to have greater freedom to be able to create, paint, musically compose something that you could never have dreamed of if you didn't have that discipline and limitation. And so that's the same with ethics, and when we think of things where freedom is confused with total autonomy, where there are no limitations, and you see things like addictions happening, and that's really, you become a slave to the habits of your life where you thought it was freedom, but it turned out to be slavery. And so that's how I see creativity. Maybe
Do you want to say anything about
thoughts
this?
too?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the discipline part is really, really important because, exactly what you said, you are able to broaden what you're able to actually get at with in terms of art. When I think about this, I am reminded of two specific things. One is a passage, a biblical passage, which I can't right now get the actual place in the Bible. Maybe someone can help you out, but it's talking about the Lord giving you the desires of your heart. And basically not meaning that he will give you everything you want, but that he will guide your heart into the things that are going to benefit you. And the second thing is an example we find in a piece of art in Dante's Purgatory, a weird place to go, but we see this one character who he finally achieves his salvation, and then he sticks around with Dante. And it's a bit of a weird thing because it's like, okay, well, if you got salvation, you want to go to heaven, right? But the thing you can draw from that is that sticking with Dante is an important thing in the premise of this book, so important that his will, which is now perfect, allows him to be free to do that. So it's the idea that when we discipline ourselves, in art, in performance, or in life, we are setting those boundaries in order so that we can one day move, into places we've never seen before in ways that are more genuine.
So what I'm hearing is that a true sense of freedom actually requires boundaries. I think that's what you guys are saying. Sam, here's a question for you. What's one of the most dangerous or unhelpful answers to the question, what does it mean to be human, that you have encountered in our culture or in your talks or whatever, and why do you see it as a dangerous answer?
I'd love an hour or so to think on that, which I'm presuming you're not going to give me. I think that some of the examples I gave at the beginning of my talk they're examples of what I've heard described as nothing buttery.
Yeah.
This idea that we're nothing but our minds, nothing but our bodies, nothing but our instincts. And I think that kind of reductionism is always dangerous because it reduces our humanity to one aspect of it that is designed to be part of an integrated whole. And when you reduce our humanity to just one component, you end up dehumanizing other people in some way. Because there's always going to be someone who expresses a lesser version of that component than you do. So that is always going to be very dangerous. I think we need to understand our humanness in a holistic way. We're designed to, we're psychosomatic. Is that the right word? No. We're kind of, there's a word
we're body souls.
Thank you, that'll do. And there's meant to be an integration there. So we're not just our mind and our capacities. We're not just our physicalities. We're not just our bodies. And we're also not just the self that we feel ourselves to be irrespective of our bodies. There's an intended integration between our physicality, our spirit, our emotional side, our minds, and everything else.
If I may just add a footnote, it strikes me one of the most dangerous views is that we are autonomous, that we can simply do our own thing. And that's just fine. You can go back to the early chapters of Genesis and find out what happened when a couple of people decided to do that. Another question, please. Don't be shy. Come on, there's a lot of you here. No? Yes? A complaint, a comment, a disagreement? Wow, what a shy group.
John?
Yeah,
That's
I missed
me.
it. Oh, please, Maria, go ahead.
What came to mind as we were talking about freedom, I remembered I did an etching many years ago when I was an art student in Vancouver, and it's called self-bondage. I did actually several studies, and this one was, I used my hand and I wrapped it up in some ropes and all kinds of torn, you could still see the hand, but it was bound up. And that was partly what I experienced and came to understand, that we are capable of, being our worst enemies and be bound by ourselves and not free. And as also relating to my experience, the only way to be set free is through Christ. And that's what I experienced. And it's something that's impossible to describe in any kind of rational. It's a spiritual, and it was really like something that gave meaning to my life. Otherwise, I would not be here today, because I lost, and as a young person, 23, I lost meaning of my life lost meaning. And I wanted to share that with you, because that freedom is something that obviously we all long for. Mm-hmm. But what the true freedom is only when we can, through Christ, with the grace and redemption, to really be, at least to some degree, in harmony with our Creator.
Thank you, Maria. This is a question for Stephen, but I'm going to be bold and say that if others would like to respond to it as well, but Stephen, you first. In this modern society full of so many different influences, especially in relation to art and artistic expression, what brought you to do art, first of all? And secondly, what brought you to base your artistic works around the gospel and around biblical teachings?
That is a big question. But I think to tackle the first part, what brought me to do art, as much as I like to think I'm a good sort of speaker and writer, I'm not as good as getting what's in my head out onto a page or out to you fine folk. And I think I've always been trying to find sort of the vocabulary to do that. And I've tried a bunch of different things. I've done music and I've done, I don't dance, but I've done drama and stuff like that. But I think through visual art and through comics was the way that I've best been able to take what's in here and put it out there in a way that at least I can, visually rationalize it to myself. If it's hard for people to understand, if like, no one's in my head, they're not going to read my mind when they look at my my piece. But that's really the root of it for me. And in terms of the second question, why does it so often bring up, the narrative of Christ and, biblical themes and stuff like that? It's I take influence from Tolkien, who once said that something along the lines of, a Christian and an artist. If they are a Christian and an artist, then Christ will come through in their art, no matter what they do, even if they, try against it. I don't believe in trying to force, shoehorn any, Jesus into any of my pieces, because then they get cringy and no one wants to read them, and I don't want to read them or make them. But I do believe that God is the true source of all beauty, and I just want to reflect that. I have not just a plug, but I have a book at the back there, which is the most recent thing I've done, sort of on a longish scale. It's not that long, but and it's sort of along those lines is where we were talking earlier about looking up at the stars and saying, like, God, why do you still care about me, even though you do care about me? It's sort of tackling that same question. It's looking at it and saying, looking at the stars, these things that we have above our heads all the time, and just trying to, as best as I can in my humble humanness, reflect that out in a way that I understand.
Somebody else want to respond to that question? If you remember the question. With so many influences, especially in relation to art and artistic expression, what brought you to do art? Briefly.
I would like to just say it was greatest influences were my parents, who were both artists and Christians. And we grew up, we lived in former Czechoslovakia, and my father had been imprisoned during the Stalin era. And so all the background, and also my parents being Christians in a communist dictatorship country was not an easy lifestyle. And yet they, remained faithful and, had influenced me through art and also as witness with their life of faith. And so I was very thankful, and I have a lot of their artwork also. So even through the work, I still feel their spirit and their the love of art and love of people and love of God.
Yeah, so, I was born in Moscow, Russia, and so I had a Russian nanny who did lots of arts and crafts with me
You
from a young
dropped your
age.
accent, it seems.
Yeah. No, I'm Canadian. My parents were working over there as professors and humanitarians, and they have a huge appreciation for the arts. I would go to the ballet, I would go to the symphony. Tickets were much cheaper over there. When we returned home to Canada, I was 9 years old, and an artist discovered discovered me and booked me for my first exhibition at 11 years old. And from very early on, I really saw no kind of dichotomy between my faith and my art, and having, like, similar to you, not feeling like I had to be overt in kind of pushing my faith through my work. It was very natural, just a love of the environment and the beauty of animals, and that gradually developed into a career that I'm very fortunate to be able to do what I love and to support conservation efforts and various humanitarian charitable efforts through donating my works, and very fortunate to be able to do what I love and share it with others.
Can I have one very
Of course
quick
you can.
thought?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Simply that God is an artist. And so it's not something we have to psych ourselves up into becoming if we're human beings made in his image. We are made by an artist, and we are in fact works of his art. So it is no surprise that we find ourselves instinctively being artistic in one way or another. That is actually an essential part of our humanity.
Okay, final question. It's an easy one. What exactly is the image of God? I don't know about exactly, but I think they'll at least make some characterizations or whatever. It must be more than creativity, because animals can be creative. It must be more than freedom, because animals display freedom. It must be more than intelligence, because animals have at least some capacity for intelligence. There you are. So, image of God.
Yeah, I can take that question.
Okay.
There.
Well, I'd like to hear from you all briefly. Away you go.
Yeah, I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts. So yeah, there have been various interpretations, of course, over the years. There is the rationalist view, substantialist view, which Sam kind of alluded to, that humans being made in the image of God means that they could reason, and Sam explained why that has some problems, and we see that for obviously the preborn child or mentally disabled. There's also the aspect that we're relational, but animals can be relational to a certain extent. I may disagree that animals can be creative, in the sense that if you give an elephant a paintbrush, it's going to probably, paint something on a canvas. But when you think of human culture is something unique to Homo sapiens as a species. When you think of the cultural Big Bang that occurred, and anthropologists have been able to discover that coincided with humans, and that's unique to them. I think that's important. Humans create different styles. They follow different lines of work. Beavers build dams because their parents built dams. Humans don't have to follow in the footsteps of their parents. But I personally would say that my view of the image of God really goes back to Genesis 1 and 2, in which humans are given the role of being stewards of the earth and proper servant leadership. And, we hear things about climate change and how humans have neglected the earth. And so God has given us this unique role and responsibility to have, that if you purely put humans on the same level as animals in maybe a biocentric worldview or pantheist worldview, why do you have a justification for humans having to take care of the earth? Why wouldn't a chimpanzee have to, save the whales, or a dolphin saving the polar bears? The thing is, there has to be some unique responsibility that humans have, and that's what I think the image of God really is.
I would say I'd echo all of that, and add that if you go back into that account of Genesis chapter 1, at the very point in that creation account when God makes a creature in his image, God emphasizes his plurality. He doesn't say, let me make a creature in my image. Actually, he says, let us make in our image. And so at that very point, we see that the God in whose image we are made is not just one person, but actually in the Christian account, he's three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He's triune. And therefore, we are not just individual human beings, we are persons. And persons relate to persons. We are persons in relationship, made in the image of a God who is himself persons in relationship, which is why love and our understanding of love is central to our understanding of what it means to be human and how to fulfill our humanity. Because we were made out of love, the love that exists within the Trinity, and we've been created to love God, to love one another.
Briefly from
Yeah,
Stephen, briefly, and then Maria, if you want to comment.
How am I going to top answering what is the image of God by talking about the Trinity, which is just as, if not more complicated. No, I think, and this might be a little bit of a cop-out because I don't know if it exactly addresses the question, because I don't think I am at all qualified to answer that specific question. But I think that the image of God is a choice and not one that we made. God, hypothetically, and I'm going to try not to be heretical here, could have, made dogs in the image of God or something like that. But he chose us because he loves us and because we're the creation that he made, and that he made to be in community and, to be creative. And I think, we wrestle with these really big questions, but something that's become more and more, prevalent to me is understanding that I won't really ever understand these big questions, and that understanding that, God chose me and he chose you too, and that is more amazing than we can ever imagine.
Maria, do you have a comment, briefly?
Yes, it's very simple. I think image of God is love. And wherever two or three are gathered in his name, there is love and there is God. So,
All right, yeah. Yeah, image of God is a big question. I said earlier that the organization that I'm with is called IMAGO, which comes from image of God idea, and we are called to image forth. We could have a very long discussion about image of God, but our time is up. So I want you, please, to join me in thanking the panel.